Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to the Walk of Shame. It's your man, Ant Walker, here to talk about UFC on ESPN 3, aka UFC Minneapolis. Man, oh man, oh man, oh man. Francis Ngannou just did the damn thing. Um, this is kind of the outcome a lot of people expected, that Ngannou would get a quick finish. I mean, there's no reason to believe any other outcome depending on the style matchup. And when you pair him up against a guy like JDS, who is known primarily for what he does with his hands, you got to expect that that's going to be the outcome at this point with the level of power that Ngannou possesses. It's just ungodly what it does to you. It's just not even. It's just not even funny. That dude hits like a truck. Just get out of the damn way. Yeah, that's kind of it. So let's talk a little bit about that brief moment of action, what that was. So I was very intrigued by the leg kicks to start from both guys. I kind of expected it from JDS. That's something we saw when he fought Stipe in the rematch, and obviously he didn't go too well for him. But he had Stipe hurt from the leg kicks, and at least from what I can recall at UFC 211, I think it was, that caused Stipe to kind of turn up the tempo, which ultimately led to him getting the finish. That, like, the pain of that kick, and he knew he just didn't have much left in him if he took another couple of those. And I kind of thought we were headed down a similar path, except that JDS could have won, man. When he got him with that first leg kick and buckled him right away, it's like, oh man, this is going to be different. This is going to be different. You saw JDS kind of close that distance in a real sly fashion. He got the 2 to the body. I mean, that was a very, very nice punch right there. So I was really thinking, like, man, JDS might pull this off. He might out finesse him. And that's something that we've seen him do. Granted, we haven't seen him do that necessarily in quite some time, I guess, with the exception of Tai Tuivasa. But we saw him out finesse Shane Carwin, who was a power striker. We saw him out finesse Roy Nelson, known for his power striking. We saw him out finesse Mark Hunt as well. Man, it just didn't work this time. I mean, Francis Ngannou is just a different sort of fighter, man. He's just a different sort of physically imposing presence. The obvious thing now, we're talking title shot. We have to be talking a title shot at this point, because you can safely assume that anybody that you put in front of Francis Ngannou, not named Daniel Cormier or not named Stipe Miocic, probably going to get flatlined. You'd be hard pressed to come up with a name right now in the heavyweight division that seems like they can stand up to this. That seems like they have the style to do it. Hey, if we didn't see Curtis Blades get knocked in the next year in China in December, I would say maybe Blades gets him in a rematch, but we see the results of that. There's nobody else, man. There's nobody else. It has to be the winner of Daniel Cormier and Stipe Miocic. That's it. The question now, though, is, where does he fit in with those two? Because we saw what happened when he fought Stipe, and Stipe definitely ruined the invincible perception that the UFC built up around Francis Ngannou. We saw him completely obliterate that with very strategic wrestling, very good top control, cardio that just kept going, Everlast Bunny type of stuff there, and he just put it on him to then kind of put that chink in the armor, and you see, okay, wrestling defense is kind of where he falters. Now, do you think Stipe wants to do that rematch? I wouldn't think so if I were him. Why? You had a definite win last time. You dominated that. Why? And I get, yeah, maybe there's no one else left, but and if that's the case, it forces the situation. But if you got a choice and you're Stipe Miocic, I don't know. I don't know about this one. And if you're the UFC and you're back on the Francis Ngannou hype train, which apparently they clearly are, since he's been in nothing but main events since the Derek Lewis loss, you got to think, man. Do you want to put him up against a matchup like that? Do you think that completely undoes the retelling of the invincibility of the Predator? I think that's something that we need to ponder. Now, as far as Daniel Cormier goes, man, my very first walk of shame was for the UFC event in Phoenix, which was headlined by Ngannou and Cain Velasquez. And in that, I was saying, man, he just knocked out Cain Velasquez. He knocked out Daniel Cormier's best friend / training partner. You know, for Cormier might want that revenge, man. He might. You can sell that angle if Cormier gets out of this this match in Anaheim and UFC 241 on top. You definitely can sell that angle. If you're Daniel Cormier, though, I mean, and you get past Stipe Miocic, maybe you don't want to take that because of the danger in it, and you know you can retire on top, or you chase that John Jones trilogy fight. I don't know, but you gotta have Francis Ngannou on your radar right now. If you're Daniel Cormier, you have to. I think it'd be foolish not to, and quite frankly, that's a fight that could sell. Oh man, that can sell. If I'm the UFC, I want Daniel Cormier to beat Stipe because at least you can put that mega fight together. And while DC has a strong chance of handling him the same way Stipe did, hey, that's a big fight. Cormier, for all intents and purposes, might just be walking away with that, and you know, stepping away with his win, stepping out on top. And then what? Then you have Francis Ngannou, who now is kind of like the uncrowned champion. That's a possibility. And I don't think that's a bad one. I don't think that it will totally undo the marketing job that the UFC has done, and clearly the results that Francis puts in the cage if you were to have him lose against one of the greatest fighters of all time in Daniel Cormier. I don't think that worst case scenario doesn't sound too bad to me. Doesn't sound too bad to me at all. And I just think that fight would sell, and it sounds like an incredible matchup. Francis Ngannou needs to be fighting for the title next, no matter if it's DC or Stipe, or if DC wins and he vacates. Now, Rob Hyman in the chat, what's up, Rob? He's saying that maybe John Jones moving up. You know what? I have absolutely no problem with that. I think we all are kind of waiting for John Jones to move up, and Francis Ngannou is as great of a test as any in that division for John Jones. Like, you gotta just wonder, man. We've seen John Jones get his chin touched a couple times. We've seen it get touched, and you wonder if Ngannou touches it, does he stand? That's the question. I mean, that's kind of like almost the heavyweight version of the Lost Jones Rumble fight. If we want to, you know, go back in our time machines way back when that fight was going on, which a couple years ago, something like that. I really do like the idea of Jones versus Ngannou, but let Jones get through Thiago Santos first. Let DC fight Stipe again, and we'll see where the chips fall. But either way, man, I'm excited about what we see with Francis Ngannou next. And I do like the fact now that he's training full-time in Vegas, I believe. I think he's training at Extreme Couture now. He's with had Dewey Cooper in his cage, in his corner. I mean, I saw Kamaru Usman in his corner as well. So I guess Usman is part of his camp too. I mean, there's some good names to have behind you. He was training with, forgive me for not remembering the team's name out of France, but you know, there comes a point, man, where you gotta step up to the next level of coaching. And if you are headed into what looks like it should be your second title shot, yeah, you probably should have championship level coaching. And it looks like some of the little things that we saw, looks like we're starting to see Ngannou kind of reach some of his potential. I want to see what that ground game looks now. I want to see what it looks like. We did see him throw a couple leg kicks. Like things are coming together. I mean, he's still very much a beginner, which is scary to think about. He's still a guy who is so fresh to mixed martial arts that we have not seen the finished product of Ngannou just yet. We really haven't. And I'm very much looking forward to what that looks like. Maybe it looks like a championship belt around his waist, whether he can take it off of Stipe or DC, or whoever else gets thrown in case DC decides to vacate, or John Jones if he moves up. The possibilities are endless. I'm loving every bit of it. All right, so I really do want to talk about the co-main event. Jussier Formiga loses a second round TKO to Joseph Benavidez at flyweight. The long awaited axing of the flyweight division. Man, I'm telling you, every time we talk about this flyweight division disappearing, there's reason to say, hey, it shouldn't. There's reason to say that this division needs to stay. This division needs to stay. If you are not appreciative of the flyweights, please just jump off a bridge. Can you do that for me? I don't like the stupidity and not appreciating what the flyweights do. That was a very exciting fight. That was an incredible performance by Joseph Benavidez. We've seen Formiga on a tear. I think it was a 4-fight win streak he's been on. Saw him handle Davison Figueiredo a couple months back. I'm sorry, man. This division's too good, and I think this is the best outcome for the hopes of the division, that Benavidez be the one who's declared the winner, because he does have that win over Henry Cejudo. Now, while that win was very controversial, it was a split decision win that a lot of people were up in arms about. But man, Cejudo sees that L on his record, and he wants that one back. Maybe you can lure him out once he's, healed up from his shoulder surgery. Maybe you lure him back in flyweight for this fight, and at least this division can stick around for a little bit longer. It's just a shame. It's really a shame that the UFC has cut so many of the rank and file guys at flyweight, because now we don't really have much of a division. It's like 10 guys left. Yeah, I guess you can have a top 10, but what does that mean if it's only 10 guys? See Rob in the chat saying, wouldn't mind seeing Cejudo and Benavidez at 135. I wouldn't mind seeing that either, but I'd much rather see it at 125. Benavidez is at his best at 125. And granted, he was incredible at 135. He was incredible at 135. But he's better at 125. That's saying something. That is saying a lot. All right, so before we get into sort of the historical implications of what Benavidez was able to accomplish tonight, let's talk about the actual fight itself. So round one, I scored for Benavidez, obviously. Well, not obviously. That was a pretty tightly contested round, I think, because Benavidez started off very strong with the body kicks. I thought he was kind of setting him up for the headshot, similar to what Valentina Shevchenko did to Jessica Ai a couple of weeks ago. That's really what I thought was going on. But if that was the game plan, it definitely changed the moment Formiga opened up that cut on Joe's eye. And what a terrible spot to get that cut. And you could see how it was affecting him, besides the fact that he was blinking and rubbing his eye away, and how distracting that is, and his vision being affected. He really had a tough time trying to get his bearings back for the rest of that round. But man, shout out to the cut man. I forget the cut man's name, but man, he did a fantastic job patching that up. And that second round, you didn't see a trickle of blood. You didn't see a trickle of blood coming down Joe's eye, and he went in there after it and got it, man. And it looked like it. Then you started seeing Formiga getting outclassed. You saw Formiga just struggling to get some sort of momentum, gain some sort of ground, and Benavidez just kind of picking his shots and doing essentially whatever he wanted. One thing I really liked that he did from a technical standpoint is using the knee tap to set up his strikes. Now, we've seen like Frankie Edgar, this is like his favorite move, that knee tap to the overhand and go for the takedown that way. But Benavidez used that as a feint. He used that as a setup to get more striking, and I think that's such a good strategy against a guy who primarily is a grappler, a guy who's known for his abilities on the floor, who's just in the past several years started really rounding out his kickboxing game. To be able to get his mind going back to grappling in that split second, and then you switch it back up to remind him, hey, this is an MMA fight, and you put those hands on him. I really, really like what he did there. That was incredible. And how in God's name did Jussier Formiga not fall asleep right on that head kick? That was an amazing head kick that landed flush. It was like half the shin was along his jawline, the other half was on his neck. I don't know if any of you watching now have ever absorbed a kick like that. I have. It sucks. It sucks. I took one so hard that my vision went black and white, and everything I was hearing was like from a tunnel or something. To be able to take a flush kick like that and not go down is a feat. That is a feat right there. For the record, I was still standing, but I also didn't get kicked by an all-time great fighter, which a topic that we will be jumping into. Rob also chiming in saying Formiga likely heads to another promotion now. That is probably true, and that sucks. That really sucks. The way they cut Dustin Ortiz after a great performance against Joseph Benavidez, despite the fact that he lost, like the way he looked so complete as a fighter, and you've seen his improvement over the years, and they cut him. You know, Shorty Torres was so hyped coming into the UFC. He gets, I think, one fight, and they bounce him out. So this flyweight situation's a mess. But let's talk about Benavidez's place in history. Now, I had a little segment with my man Jason Burgos, who I do the Trenches live chat with on Sherdog.com. And we were kind of debating about where Joby stands as far as the all-time great fighters that never won a title. Now, of course, if we're talking about just specifically a UFC title, you bring up your Uriah Fabers, you'll bring up Donald Cerrone, who certainly has a claim to that as well, and Dan Henderson, and there's some very notable names that you can throw on that list of all-time great fighters that never won belts in the UFC. But I want to separate Uriah Faber from that mix because his belt lineally was a UFC belt. He was at one point the best flyweight on earth in the WEC when that was the premier organization for the lighter weight classes. Obviously, you know the story. Zuffa owned that promotion and folded it into the UFC and carried those titles in a lineal sense there. Dan Henderson, I want to rule out for a couple of reasons. Well, obviously, the Pride and Strikeforce titles, those are now lineally part of the UFC. And he did win a UFC tournament in the early days. And that's something a lot of people forget, that Dan Henderson does have gold from the UFC. I think it's actually in the form of a medal instead of a belt. But Dan Henderson has a form of UFC championship on his mantle. Donald Cerrone would fit into the Benavidez category of someone who didn't get a belt in any major promotion. However, this is where you separate Donald Cerrone and Joseph Benavidez. With the exception of the very controversial split decision loss to Sergio Pettis, Benavidez, he lost to Dominic Cruz, the greatest bantamweight of all time, bar none. He lost to Demetrius Johnson, the greatest flyweight and perhaps greatest fighter of all time. And these are subjects that are not up for debate. Those two gentlemen are all-time greats. MMA Watchdog saying Benavidez looks better without the Koscheck hairstyle. Man, I was liking the hairstyle. Maybe because it's, he's got the Hispanic version of mine, but I was digging the hair. And that was a smooth choice by him. But yeah, man, I think Joseph Benavidez is separated from Donald Cerrone because of that. Donald Cerrone has a loss to Nate Diaz, who is not an all-time great, an exciting fighter, an all-time fan favorite, but not an all-time great fighter. Let's see, who else is he? Masvidal, not an all-time great fighter, fan favorite, one of the all-time underrated fighters, but not on that greatest of all time list. Who else? Robbie Lawler is not a GOAT candidate, although he is a great fighter as well. So Donald Cerrone has losses against guys who are not all-time greats, multiple losses. And Joseph Benavidez only has that one of controversial split decision to Sergio Pettis. So I think that alone separates Joseph Benavidez from Donald Cerrone as the greatest fighter to never hold a major belt that's been on the UFC roster. That I think that right there seals his legacy. Hopefully he gets a shot at the flyweight title. It would be criminal if he didn't. This guy is literally, and I'm seeing this comment in the chat too, he's been in limbo for a long time, man. This man was in limbo at 135 because he lost twice to Dominic Cruz. The flyweight division opens up, and he got put out there twice by Demetrius Johnson, found himself in purgatory again. Let this man get a title shot. Let it happen, especially when you consider the fact that the UFC is so insistent on having a belt on every single pay-per-view. Now, I do appreciate the UFC trying to put quality fights on the pay-per-views, but excuse me, in the case we just had with Tony Ferguson and Donald Cerrone, where a fight that should have been scheduled for a main event, and was definitely a high quality fight, but they had to put title fights on the card. So you get what I'm saying, right? You don't need a title fight on the pay-per-view to make it legit. You just put a good fight there. You put a fight that means something. You put a fight that could be entertaining as the main event. And the insistence that where it works out for the flyweights, the insistence that they have a belt on every pay-per-view is flyweight is another belt. That's another belt. That's another chance you can slap some shiny gold on the poster, and somebody who doesn't know any wiser is going to just pony up their money because they see a belt. It's another opportunity to do that. So why completely strip away a division that can do that? And a division that, it keeps providing excitement constantly, consistently, excitement. I just don't get it. What's the rush? And I know Dana White just said, "Oh, the flyweights are sticking around," but do you believe it? Do you really believe it when there are 9 or 10 guys on the roster for the entire division? Come on now. You guys are better than that. You think better than that. So yeah, man. Joseph Benavidez, one of the all-time guys that we need to be recognizing when we're having these historical conversations, and a guy who, quite frankly, needs a title shot at flyweight. Oh, so the homie Jay, the man who does all the stat work for Jason and I on the trenches, and for the new panel discussion show Off the Chain for SureDog.com. He just dropped this little nugget on me. The post-fight bonuses have been announced. Performance of the night bonuses are going to Ngannou, Benavidez, Minifield, and Anders. Doesn't look like there's a fight of the night awarded. But yeah, man, that's pretty dope. Benavidez tied Johnson for the most wins in the UFC flyweight division and holds the most knockouts in divisional history. Get this man a title shot. Okay. I mean, hey, they were so happy about all these interim belts. This would have been a great time for an interim belt. It certainly would have been. It would have been a fantastic time to have an interim belt. But you eliminate, the most of this division. Who's going to fight for it now? Who is going to fight for it? Somebody please answer that question, because who's left? They've cut everybody that's lost. Despite the fact that these guys are getting better, despite the fact that these guys consistently provide exciting fights, despite the fact that they're probably the most technically skilled on the roster. Smaller guys have to be if you're going to survive that training room. So, man, I don't know. But I'm hoping that the UFC does the right thing and they give Joseph Benavidez his shot at the title. So Jay is also dropping another good nugget on me here. Alejandro Pantoja is on a 3-fight win streak, and he's fighting Figueiredo in July. Yeah, that's a guy that makes sense to be in that mix, but he's got to get through Figueiredo. Like, if Figueiredo wins that fight, Then what? Then we're gonna say, oh well, he's 1-1 in his last two. He doesn't deserve it. That's what people are gonna say, or that's what the UFC is gonna say, and they're just gonna move on and probably try to entice Joby to go up to 135 and fight Cejudo there. But then you've got Aljamain Sterling, who's just smoking everybody they put in front of him. Recently we got Peter Yan. He's healing up from it was a blood infection or something like that. So you've got guys at 135 who are lined up and ready and deserving. So you're gonna just, I don't know. You gotta treat Joby with some respect. That man's been putting in too much work for too long, and he's been too damn good at it. Give this man his respect. Give this man his title shot. Anything less is just an insult. All right, so let's talk about Damian Maia versus Rocco Martin. I'm still getting used to saying Rocco Martin. I still getting used to that. When he was Tony Martin, he was one of my first live interviews on Sherdog. So yeah, it just takes my mind to get a little adjusted. But anyway, Damian Maia wins a decision there. It was 229-28 and I believe it was a 28-28. And I was the majority decision. I don't know. I wouldn't have scored that last round for Rocco Martin a 10-8. I don't think anybody was in any significant danger long enough to justify it. But what do I know? The right guy won, though. Damian Maia did deserve to win that fight, but I think we're starting to see the cracks in the armor. So let's go ahead and break down some of the technical aspects of this fight. So in the first 90 seconds, Damian Maia does what he's going to do. He's going to go for that single leg. He gets it, but Martin did a very, very good job of nullifying Maia trying to work toward a submission and trying to improve his position. Now, one thing that we saw with the Nurmagomedov and McGregor fight, he got McGregor against the fence while he's sitting down, and he was triangling his legs and just kind of locking him in place. And you saw Maia trying to do that. However, he really couldn't do it. He really couldn't do it. Martin did a fantastic job of getting his legs out of there and just making himself very hard to simply hold down, at least his lower half. And that was kind of essential to locking him in that position. But even still, Martin had trouble getting up. But can you imagine how impossible it would have been had his legs been triangled down and he wouldn't have been able to move? But he found his way back up. But Maia wins that round, obviously, and Maia wins the second round too by essentially the same thing. These chain takedowns. He gets him down, controls the position again. Once again, Martin does a good job of keeping his legs from getting triangled and trapped. But let's talk about this trash ass referee, Vance Swearden, Swearden, I think his name is. So of course we're going to trash him later on for a ridiculously terrible stoppage that we saw in the Eric Anders fight. But let's talk about how trash this guy is as a ref for standing up a fight when Damian Maia is in mount with the guy pressed up against the cage. He actually did succeed in getting those legs trapped and securing his body against that fence and working towards something. And that's when your man Vance steps in and pulls him away and stands the fight up. You've got to be kidding me. You have got to be kidding me. What a deplorable job of refereeing. There's no defense for that. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. There's no defense for that. You have a jiu-jitsu master, perhaps the greatest BJJ player that's ever fought high-level mixed martial arts. And this guy's got somebody in mount working towards something, and you stand it up for inactivity. Trash. Super trash. Get him up out of there. If the UFC comes back to Minnesota anytime soon, or period, they come back to Minnesota, this dude better not be there. They better not even let this guy in the building. This guy shouldn't be allowed to buy a ticket. It should block ESPN on his cable subscription. This dude is trash. Get him up out of there. But let's talk about this third round before I stand even more prominently on my soapbox. So in that last round, got to score that for Martin. Obviously, I'm not going to go as far as 10-8, but he definitely controlled most of that round. And I think it's so strange. Damian Maia, we know him as a one-trick pony. We all know that. We all accept it, and that's kind of what makes his fights exciting / boring. It's what keeps us intrigued and why we watch every time Damian Maia fights. At any moment he can twist you into a pretzel, and if he can't, hijinks ensue. That's kind of the pattern with Damian Maia. But this is another one of those fights where he reminds us of his limitations. You saw when he couldn't get that fight to the ground in that third round, how helpless he essentially was. There was really not a whole lot he could do, even when he was able to get the fight to the ground. It had to be from straight up basic, wrestling takedown to BJJ. That's really all he could offer. It wasn't like, like the aforementioned example of Frankie Edgar going for that overhand and then, knee tapping you, or, a punch combination, get the hands up and then you shoot in. It was none of that. It's just straight wrestling to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and that's pretty much all he has to offer. And this was strange because this was the first time, at least at 170, that we were reminded how limited he is by a guy who's not a champion or not, considered a title threat. So let's see. Let me run back some of these in my brain right now. Think about, okay, Chris Weidman, when Chris Weidman was able to nullify him. Granted, he did like a 30-pound weight cut in like a week and a half or something crazy like that. So, a depleted version of him was able to nullify Damian Maia. Obviously, Chris Weidman went on to defeat Anderson Silva and defend the middleweight belt a few times. And he's a guy that we recognize for championship level accomplishments. Anderson Silva, okay, one of the greatest fighters of all time. We recognize championship level material there. And when Maia wasn't able to get him down, not a whole lot he could do except watch Anderson dance around him as he randomly decided to punch and kick him in the face. So then we look at who else in the welterweight division. His losses to Tyron Woodley, Colby Covington, and Kamaru Usman. You're talking about the last three guys to have a welterweight belt strapped around their waist. So there's that. Rocco Martin, I mean, I don't want to take anything away from him at all because he's made some fantastic improvements and he looked very good in the last bit of this fight. And even the parts that Damian Maia won, he handled it very well. But this is not a guy that we're talking about in the title discussion. I think at 41 years old, we're seeing the decline of Damian Maia. That's what it looks like. Rob jumping in the chat saying Maia's a good gatekeeper, nothing more. I think we can safely put him in that category now. I don't think he's going to be contending for a belt anytime soon. And Jay with a great nugget right here is throwing to me in the Slack chat here. He's saying, is it telling that Martin stood in front of him with his hands down because he did not fear Maia striking one bit? I think that does say a lot. I mean, if you were to stand in front of a better striker with your head dipped that low, with your hands low, and literally waving your head around, almost teasing the fact that your head is a target right there, you're getting clipped, or you better be on some Roy Jones shit. That's about it. You can't get away with that. Like that's Anderson Silva clowning everybody level skills right there. You just don't see that happen too often. And Damian Maia is definitely a guy you can pull that off on because his striking isn't, it isn't up to par. But his jiu-jitsu is so good. But then when you can't use it, what can he do? Yeah, what else can you do? I think that's saying a lot there, man. So let's see what else. What else about this fight? One thing I did really find interesting from a fight IQ standpoint, and I know the commentary team was, I think Bisbing in particular was riled up about this, and my wife was probably tired of hearing me yell about it. But I was just wondering where those head kicks were from Martin in that last round, because Maya the entire time kept circling to the power side. He kept circling to the power side, and it just seemed like the perfect opportunity to nail him with that head kick. He almost nailed him with that head kick as he was standing still. So imagine, taking away a split second of reaction time because you're moving toward it. He would have got nailed with that. But I don't know. This is probably as good of a fight that you can expect for a losing fighter to have, and Rocco Martin. But I do I agree with what you're saying here in the chat, Rob. Give Martin another fighter kind of hovering around the top 15 or to the bottom half of the top 15. And yeah, that should be an appropriate test to kind of see where he's at. And I think for Damian Maia, I think you just, now at this point, you just got to put him up against those guys that are trying to break into that top 10, that are trying to establish themselves. Yeah, man, I wouldn't mind seeing I wouldn't mind seeing like maybe Vicente Luque or something, and Rocco Martin. That sounds like a decent enough fight for me. I'm kind of feeling that. All right, so let's see what else we got. Roosevelt Roberts and Vince from Hell Pichel, lightweight fight there. So he hands Roosevelt Roberts his first defeat. First round starts off, Roberts controlled the range, and he was very successful in the feet. I found it very strange that he kept trying to get it to the ground. I know he is a guy who really loves the submissions, but if you're tagging a guy on the feet like that, why slow it down by initiating those clinches and getting stalled up against the fence, trying to drag it to the ground? Why? What's the point? Keep doing what's being successful for you. And he was really putting it on him. When you stand at 6'2" and you're in the lightweight division, you're gonna have some advantages from just a stature standpoint. You're just gonna have those advantages. So use that jab, man. Use those hands. Keep them to the outside of your range and tee off where you can. And he was doing that, and he just decided that he didn't feel like doing it anymore. And I found that very strange. I found that really strange. And then you see in the second round, Pichel starts taking over. He has success on the ground. He's controlling the top position. And then in the last round, it just kind of looked the exact same. Like Pichel gets it down, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Like I don't know what else. It wasn't a whole lot else to talk about in that fight. Drew Dober, Marco Polo Reyes. Dober murdered him. I mean, he swarmed on him. It wasn't. I will have to rewatch that fight to try to pick up some of the finer points technically, but Dober just swarmed on him, caught him cold. Great strategy. Drew Dober. Now we gotta talk about this guy as someone who's greatly improved a lot. So I'm really curious as to what they do with him. I think he deserves something at least near the top 15 at this point. Let's see. Rob saying Dober versus Pinion should be next. I'm not mad at that. And Reyes versus any fighter near the cut line. That sounds about right too. I can't disagree with it. Any one of those. Now Dober, I think too, is pretty interesting because you can pair him up with a lot of people and get something exciting. He's a guy who can fit very well into several different style matchups, and something exciting can be produced. And he's made a lot of subtle improvements to his technique and stuff. So I'm very curious what that growth looks like at a higher level. Yeah, and that, and keep in mind, he did lose that fight against Beneil Dariush, but dude, he was putting it on him. He was putting it on him to start. So. Cool Breeze, have you heard that Endeavor is trying to buy PBC? Yes, I have. We can talk about that toward the end. So Cool Breeze, go ahead and remind me of that toward the end, and we can briefly discuss that, because that is a very interesting story that isn't picking up the traction that it probably should. because there are a lot of interesting things that can come about from that. All right. Let's see. We got okay. Jay is dropping another nugget to me on here saying Aljo Sterling congratulated Benavidez and said he wouldn't be upset if Joe jumped Aljo's spot in line to fight Cejudo for the 135-pound belt. That's something. That does say something. I think at the very least, like if you don't put Joseph Benavidez in the 125 title shot, yeah, you could throw him in there for an interim belt against Aljo while Cejudo was healing. But I just don't like the idea of eliminating a belt when these belts seem to be so important to how this organization is running and how they're trying to operate their pay-per-views. Keep that belt. Keep that belt in play. It's another belt. It means something. Put a interim 135 going, and then then you've got another belt. You've doubled the amount of belts now you've thrown in play. So yeah, but I mean that's big of Aljo to do that, but at the same time, I don't think the UFC really gives a damn if Aljo is willing to let him cut in line because they're going to do what they want to do anyway. If they don't want Aljo to have the title shot, he's not going to have it. It's just that simple. I mean, it's nice to have the cooperation of the people that you are controlling, but it's not necessary. Yeah, I mean, it's not going to change the way the UFC is going about anything. The only thing this is going to do is going to be used as people are criticizing the evaporation of the flyweight division. This is something that Dana White would be on the podium saying, well, Aljo said it's okay. So, yeah, no 125-pound belts anymore. We're going to have Benavidez, who was the number one contender at flyweight, fight at bantamweight now. That's what's going to happen with this. It's just going to be cannon fodder for a brief line in a press conference that everybody's just going to roll their eyes about. Because they really don't give a shit what Aljo wants, what he thinks. They don't care. They don't care. They're just going to do what they want to do. All right. So, Alonzo Menifield and Paul Craig. Not a whole lot to talk about this one, man. Menifield definitely proved himself to be the superior athlete in this. The athletic prowess of Menifield was just stunning to watch in comparison to Paul Craig, who's not the worst athlete in the world either. But man, Menifield is just on a different level from a physical standpoint. And you see Craig failing on some of those takedown attempts. And I think that was mainly because Menifield was the better athlete. Like his reaction time was fantastic. His strength, obviously, you couldn't muscle him down whatsoever. And in fact, he muscled out of the takedown attempt. Balanced, to have a guy in Craig who's such a good guy on the ground and getting you to the ground, and he's got one leg, he's holding this one leg and he's trying to get that reap, he's trying to push you up against fence, drag you down, everything while you're hopping on one leg, and you manage to get out of that. That's impressive stuff. That is very impressive stuff. So Menifield showing a lot of good traits right here. I think we can all start getting really excited about him. But man, you got to wonder, why was Craig just spamming those spin kicks? Just, oh man, I know he introduces himself as a kung fu fighter, but come on now, like you can't just spam these spin kicks and expect for it to bode well for you. You just can't. Like, Menifield did exactly what he's supposed to do. You see that second or third spin or however many it was in a row, and you close that distance, you jam that kick up, and he was able to trip him and beat his head into the ground. Yeah, don't do spin kicks unless you're really good at them, unless you have the perfect setup to do them. Don't just stand there and spam head kicks or spin kicks, because things like that will happen. Spin kicks don't land very often. When they do land, it's because they're incredibly fast, they're incredibly well set up, and they're incredibly well placed. Those kicks were neither of those three. So don't do that. Just don't. All right. So, I mean, we will briefly go over the preliminary fights. Journey Newsom looked very good in defeat. Um, he lost to Ricardo Ramos, who Ramos looked good, man. It looked like he had an answer for everything that Newsom threw at him. I really was impressed by Newsom though. I was very impressed by how he looked in defeat. What an insane chin! That spinning elbow, both spinning elbows. I mean, the first spinning elbow looked like it kind of like grazed his mouth, maybe, which sounds like it hurt like hell, but it's not necessarily a knockout point. But that second one landed flush on his head. Man, he should have been asleep. I think I got concussed watching that. What a fantastic elbow. And he was able to withstand that. And then to almost get that guillotine. Now, I didn't quite hear what the commentary team was saying of what ended up derailing that guillotine attempt. But from what I saw, it looked like his grip just gave out. So please, in the chat, tell me that I'm wrong. Tell me exactly what happened if you saw something different. But to me, it looked like his grip just failed on him, which was unfortunate because he was so close, and that choke was very tight. Like he looked like he might have pulled off a miracle right there. But either way, man, we got to see this dude again. We got to see him again. And it's kind of a shame. I'm talking about Newsom more than I'm talking about Ramos, and Ramos won, and Ramos looked great in this fight. But man, I was just excited, man. The way Journey Newsom, and a name like Journey, you got to get behind that. All right, so let's talk about the other instance of that trash ref Vance Swearden and his garbage job. Eric Anders annihilates Vinicius Morea, just annihilates him. Anders was very good at defending the takedown attempts. I mean, he chained Mariah chained those attempts down, and he just kept at it. But Anders he fought his way out of it, man. Fought his way out of it. Very, very good work on his part. And then it just separates him from consciousness. How ridiculously bad was the referee in this fight? How bad was he? You could have made a case for stopping it once dude's eyes rolled up in the back of his head when he was standing and he slid down the fence. But I can understand if you let it go, a little bit after that, because he did almost looked like he woke back up. So I'm not mad at that. But for him to repeatedly take those shots, and I think like the first or second one, the ground and pound shots, he went completely limp. And you're letting Anders just wail away on him. And Anders did what he was supposed to do. You are not supposed to stop until the ref tells you. So, of course, within reason for sure. But Anders didn't do anything wrong in that scenario. The ref, however, was asleep at the wheel, did not do his job, and sucks. And he went on to suck later on in the night in the stand-up of Maya and Rocco Martin. Trash refereeing. Ridiculously bad. Now, I was impressed that Anders looked so good because the beating that he took from Khalil Roundtree last time is one of those things where it changes a fighter a lot of times. Like you think about the damage that Rory McDonald endured in the rematch against Robbie Lawler, or you think about in boxing, think about like the damage that Miguel Cotto took against Antonio Margarito. And I know, yes, Antonio Margarito's a vicious cheat, and yeah, he probably had loaded wraps and that. So let's not get on that train. But yes, I'm acknowledging that. But like Cotto, like McDonald, and then say like JDS after the Kane rematches, where damage looks totally different on you now. It's more severe. Your chin is diminished, and it's just like this. Everything looks like a war, essentially. I was very concerned that Eric Anders would have that sort of response. I mean, granted, he didn't take a whole lot of shots to the head, and maybe that's the difference, that he took so many kicks to the leg, and I'm surprised the man can walk at this point. But man, that's a good rebound. He needed this. He really needed this for a guy who came into the UFC with a certain level of hype, and to see him drop some crucial fights at crucial moments. It means a lot that you can go back in there and get a win like this. And this is a highlight reel win. This is fantastic. It's just unfortunate that we had a trash ass ref not doing his job and diminishing the talk around what the great work that Eric Anders did. So let's not lose that in translation as we're talking about how trash the ref is. All right, so let's see. We got a couple more comments in the chat here. Mike S, what's up, Mike? Great night of fights. Agreed on the matchups you listed. Give Rob a lot of credit on those matchups. Yeah, Rob is on point with the matchups tonight. Let's see who else. Ngannou versus DC or Stipe. Yeah, that's the way to go. That's definitely the way to go. Ngannou needs to be fighting one of those two gentlemen. Anything else just doesn't make sense to me. Unless, of course, John Jones moves up and fight him. Okay, I'll take that. Tommaso Mark, what's up, brother? How you feeling? I'm feeling fantastic. Mark, how are you doing this fine evening? Yes, I was pulling for JDS to pull off a miracle, and when Francis fell from that leg kick, I got excited. And then, like Thanos, Francis was inevitable. First of all, Tommaso, I am a sucker for all things nerd and comic book. So you get a kung fu bow for that fantastic use of Marvel Comics lingo to spice up this chat this evening. So I appreciate that, and I agree as well. I thought JDS was going to pull off the miracle on that leg kick. I really did. Let's see what else. Anders did his job, but the ref watched the other guy take 4 unnecessary punches. Exactly. Rob saying Vinicius should be cut. Not mad at that. He's dropped 2 pretty bad fights in a row. Two pretty lackluster performances from him in a row. I wouldn't be mad if he got his walking papers. Who took a worse beating? Roy from Lawler, Dan Hooker from Edson, or Anders from Roundtree? I'd say Hooker. I would go Hooker versus Edson on that, because like Roy and Roy was winning that fight really when he fell to Robbie Lawler. They were going back and forth a lot more. Anderson Roundtree, like I said, wasn't a lot of head trauma necessarily. He tore up his legs, but Dan Hooker got the body shots, he got the head shots, he got the leg kicks, everything. He got the sampler platter of beat down. So yeah, Hooker. Let's see. Tommaso asking, Joseph Benavidez look undeniable tonight. No, there are bigger fights for Cejudo at 35. When he returns from injury, he should have to fight Joe. Yes, and yes. Joseph Benavidez versus Henry Cejudo for the flyweight title should be the next move. Period. All right. I guess we'll mention a couple of these other ones. Jared Gordon gets a win over Dan Moret. I mean, it gets a decision win. I agree with the decision, but let's I mean, the post-fight speech was kind of the standout from the Jared Gordon fight. That was kind of standout, and that was a great post-fight speech. I'm all for a fighter jumping on the mic, and instead of just calling out their opponents and saying crazy stuff or whatever, to say something that actually means something, using their platform for something positive. That's fantastic. I mean, we all know Jared Gordon's story from drug addiction to a UFC fighter, and the lows that his life took, and to see him reach this level of athletic excellence on a big stage, and to use that platform to be appreciative of the struggles that he survived is fantastic, and deserves all the praise in the world. All the praise in the world. All right, Tommaso asking, I'm late, but did you agree with the Maya majority decision or unanimous decision? I don't agree with the majority decision. I don't think that last round should have been a 10-8, but I'm also not going to stand on the table and stomp my feet and throw a temper tantrum over it. I guess they're using the new definition, but even still, I just didn't see him in enough danger, at least for long enough, to warrant a 10-8. But whatever, as long as the right guy won, that's really what I care about more, that the right guy wins. Excuse me. All right, so Dolce Lungiambula, I think. He just destroyed Daquan Townsend in the third round. So I think it's notable to say Daquan Townsend took this fight on late notice. He took the fight on like a few days notice, I believe. I think he got the call like this week, like Tuesday or something. And he was, and he's normally a guy who fights at 185. So you would expect him to come out there and lose, but he didn't look too bad. He had a couple moments here and there. You're fighting a judo national champion. You're probably going to hit the mat at some point. But man, to see him, to see Lung Jiambala kind of lull him into a certain pace, and then that third round starts and he just blitzed them and went all out for the finish. Great stuff there. I think from an athletic standpoint, we got a lot to fear from this man. Got a whole lot to fear from this man. I wonder what he can do at either 205 or 185. Because I think he was talking about fighting at 185 or something. I don't know. Looks massive. I don't see how he makes 185. Quite frankly, I don't know much about him. So I don't know if he spent most of his career there or not, but that's a big man. I would be highly surprised if he's going to make 185. So yeah, I hope he's not trying to cut all that weight, but he looked fantastic in this. And I'm curious to see what his growth is like, especially, judo guys. They do come in with some inherent flaws, the way they give up their backs on some of those throws, and the nature of the takedowns, and you got to kind of put yourself in a more dangerous place to get them. But yeah, it should be some exciting stuff ahead for him. Emily Whitmire loses to Amanda Ribas from just really dominating grappling, able to take her down and just kind of have her way with her and get the rear naked choke in the second round. And the first round looked to me like the round where you're just kind of chipping away at the armor. You're just chipping away at the will more than anything else. And then it makes it so much easier to get that tap when you get them back on the ground and they're back in that danger zone. They're back struggling and trying to pick up some momentum, and they can't. And I like what Ribas did. Good work on her part. So the first fight of the night, Maurice Green and Junior Albini. This was exactly the fight I wanted it to be. It was sloppy. It was a mess. It was entertaining. It was a total disaster and shit show, and I was appreciative of it. Maurice Green with the first round knockout, and it was an exciting way to start the card off. I mean, quite frankly, this card was very exciting. There were a lot of good finishes, a lot of good moments in this card, particularly in the prelims. The prelims seemed to have a lot more insanity going on about them. But man, I still don't think a whole lot of what Maurice Green has to offer just yet. I do need to see more because Junior Albini is a guy I never was high on. I just never really thought a whole lot of. And I see Rob, you're just trying to cut everybody, saying Albini and Moret should be cut. you trying to fire the whole staff, man. That's what's up though. I'm not mad at Albini getting cut. Moret, I say give Moret give Moret another shot, man. His UFC no, this wasn't his UFC debut. Yeah, you might be right. Moret might be up out of there too. I don't know. But man, you just ready to throw the axe on everybody. All right. Let's see here. I do have a couple of questions Jay has dropped me that must be on the Sherdog forum. So let's see here. Apparently, Eric Anders walked out to the theme from The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. The Good, Bad, and the Ugly is the name of my post-fight column on Sherdog, so I think that's why Jay dropped that one for me. But anyway, Kung Fu Z on the Sherdog forum asked, since Stipe has been on the sidelines after losing his belt, Ngannou has knocked out his third top 5 opponent. Yes, this is true. This is very, very true. And when he defeated Cain Velasquez in Phoenix, I was saying then Stipe should be passed up for the next title shot. I know they've already booked Stipe versus DC in Anaheim, and I'll be there. I'm excited to watch that fight. I think that fight should be something to behold. And I do have a lot of respect for what Stipe did as far as standing up for himself and saying, this is what I deserve and this is what I get. And a fighter doing that, bucking the system, and then actually getting what they asked for, it is hard for me to downplay that, because that's fantastic. But let's be real here, man. If the last time we saw you was getting knocked out in the first round, and the next guy up has three back-to-back first round finishes, two of them against former champions, I'm sorry, that's title shot worthy. You know, when the DC versus Stipe fight was put together, my first thought was, man, why didn't they break up the JDS and Francis fight? Why didn't they put Francis in against DC, or even you put JDS in against DC? That would have made sense too. But those guys were out there doing things. They were out there active, and they were out there winning. I just didn't see why you had to put Stipe in, for at least for him will be an immediate rematch. So I mean, I'm with you on that one, Kung Fu Z. I think that that Ngannou, and I know you didn't quite say it, but I know what you're trying to imply. You're 100% accurate, in my opinion. Francis Ngannou deserves the title shot over Stipe Miocic. That simple. We got a year's worth of, well, actually, this happened since December. Since what? December was been 7 months? 7 months of destruction from Francis Ngannou, and we haven't seen Stipe at all. Yeah, I think the case is made. And it's not like Stipe's been out injured. He's been out injured. That's one thing. I don't believe an injury should make you lose your spot. You know, kind of like the old football rule where, you know, you lose your place on the roster because of an injury. Like when you come back healthy, you're put right back in where you left off. I believe that should be the case in fights as well. But if you're not doing anything and you're healthy, yeah, I think you're opening yourself up to getting leapfrogged in the rankings. All right, so well, it looks like I've inspired some debate here. So my guess with a JDS versus Volkov sounds great. Overeem versus Lewis. Yeah, both of those. I've been wanting to see Overeem versus Lewis fight for a while. JDS versus Volkov is a fantastic match of strikers. I like that a lot. But Tommaso saying, playing devil's advocate here, Stipe also finished 3 #1 contenders in a row and beat Francis. But I do see why Francis should have gotten the title shot first over Stipe. Yeah, like, yeah, and that's you're talking about past accomplishments that are not continuing because a guy decides he's going to sit out. That's really what the problem is here to me. Everyone keeps forgetting Curtis Blades. He needs a top 6 opponent too. Yeah, Curtis Blades factors in there as well. So yeah, there's some that maybe put Curtis Blades against a Blago Ivanov. I'm not mad at that. Not mad at that at all. Although he's not in the top 6, but you know, it gives Blades a little bit of a softer touch, maybe, but it gets him back out there. What his last win was Justin Willis. But Ivanov, you know what? Ivanov deserves that look though. Ivanov deserves that. Ivanov versus Curtis Blades. Book it. All right. Got a question here from Brutal Respect on the Sherdog forum. Asks, Maya landed 1 significant strike all fight and still wins. UFC stats say 3, with Martin landing 22. Does this demonstrate an obvious flaw in MMA scoring? Yeah. I see what you're going here, but when you're just looking at strike stats, you're not looking at the entire picture of mixed martial arts. That's the problem with statistics being the basis for arguments of who won in mixed martial arts. This fight is proof of that. It's not a flaw in the scoring. It's a flaw in the weight that these statistics hold. A lot of times, statistics, especially strike statistics, only tell part of the story. But the other part of the story, other than 3 significant strikes landing and Martin landing 22, is the control, the ground control. How long was Damian Maia controlling the action on the floor? When they were up against the fence, who had the dominant position in the clinch? There are other things to factor in other than the punches and kicks. If that's the case, we're talking about kickboxing. We're talking about kickboxing in that point. Let's see. Some also good follow-up here. Who's a better representation of jiu-jitsu and MMA, Damian Maia or Jacare Souza? I say Damian Maia, because Jacare isn't known for his game on the bottom. Jacare is a top game jiu-jitsu guy. I like the fact that Damian Maia can submit you from multiple positions. We've seen Damian Maia on his back triangle you. You see him threaten with arm bars and stuff, and he'll get on top of you and he'll choke you, and he'll climb to your back and choke you. Like, he has a much more well-rounded submission game, in my opinion, than Jacare. But Jacare is definitely on that list of some of the all-time great BJJ players that have fought in high-level mixed martial arts. Let's see. Jay also asking, why not Blades versus Volkov? That's not a bad idea either. That's not a bad idea either. I would probably be more excited for a JDS versus Volkov fight simply because the striking possibilities of it. You'd imagine if Blaze was fighting Volkov, he's shooting in for that takedown. Now, of course, it starts getting more difficult because you're talking about Volkov having insanely long limbs and, you know, the knees up the middle and his skill in landing that technique. But I really like to see Volkov and JDS. That sounds like a good time. Tommaso Mark asking, is Gunnar Nelson's next fight a must win? Is it a co-main that was announced? Honestly, I might have missed anything that was announced about Gunnar Nelson. I probably, got up to grab a little seltzer water or something, or heat up some buffalo wings or something while that was going on. So I don't know. Rob saying, I'd like to see Volkov and Reem get rebooked. I'm not mad at that either. Like, there is some good possibilities at heavyweight for a lot of these guys. So these are all win-win situations. These are all fights that we can get excited about, that we can enjoy the style matchups and the possibilities. And all of them, whoever emerges victorious can throw themselves right back into title contention. So all of this is good. All of this is very good. I like the fact that that everyone in the chat, Jay on the Slack right now, and myself, we are all throwing out these names at heavyweight, and every possibility sounds like a good time. Whoa, times have changed. Times have definitely changed for the UFC heavyweight division. And not that it's the most fantastic still. It's not. But, whoa, man, it's so much better than it used to be, huh? So much better. Like, we've got possibilities. All right. Oh, so Jay let me know. Gunnar Nelson is fighting Thiago Alves in Copenhagen in September. So I guess that was announced on the broadcast. Yeah, I would assume, man, if Gunnar Nelson can't beat Thiago Alves at this point, he's probably on the chopping block. Probably. I think this is a must win because you can't imagine Thiago Alves being around much longer. You can't. He's a guy that I think we will be okay if he just retired right now. I don't think anybody will be beating the door down for him to come back. So if Gunnar Nelson can't beat him at this point, yeah, it might be. This is a must win. It just might be a must win. I don't know if it's a co-main though. So I'm sure Jay's gonna drop that one on the chat if that was announced on the broadcast. But all right, so I see him typing now, so I'm sure he's gonna tell me something. But what else? Let me scan over this chat and make sure I'm not forgetting anything. Oh yeah, speaking of times have changed with the prospects like Johnny Walker, Dominic Reyes, Alexander Rakic, Alonzo Minifield, Ryan Spann. Does light heavyweight look brighter than it has in a long time? Yes, it does. It certainly does. Light heavyweight looks great compared to what we saw a couple of years ago, where it was extraordinarily top heavy. The only thing is now that we've lost. Obviously, John Jones is like the best fighter walking the planet. So let's get that out of the way right now. But alongside John Jones was Daniel Cormier, who I would be highly surprised if he comes back to 205, despite what he's been saying about a trilogy match with John Jones. Alexander Gustafsson is now retired. Anthony Johnson is now a 350-pound bodyguard for bare knuckle fighting championships. So, those names at the top were super elite, super incredible, and all just my God, you can mix and match them all, and it's just just beautiful, beautiful things that could happen. But you see guys like the Gunnar Nelson's aged out, Rashad Evans, and being inducted in the Hall of Fame next week. Like he's, thank God, like he's retired. Yeah, so some of those names that elevated that division have been phased out. So it doesn't have the star power that it does, or the sense of really top heavy, but you're starting to see a rounding out of a top 15, and at that in really that's more essential to a division thriving, is having a actual ranking, a top 15, and a hierarchy that can be established outside of, oh man, I'd love to see Anthony Johnson fight John Jones. Other than the top heavy names, it's good that we'll see that. Now these guys can all develop into those top heavy names. Johnny Walker, I think, is custom made for stardom. Dominic Reyes and Raykick with some development as well. Menefield looking fantastic. There are things to be excited about, but I think we should we can get excited. We can get excited, but we have to recognize that this is different. This is not the heyday of 205 reborn, because it's going to take a while for these guys to develop into the stars that we saw. I mean, when Jones first captured the belt and just tore through the division, even before he captured the belt and tore through the division, you had your Lyoto Machidas and Rashad and Glover, and before that Chuck and Rampage and Shogun. It is just name after name after name after name of just, wow, these are must-see fighters. We'll get there, though. We will get there. Tommaso saying Jones says the UFC has to pay him a lot of money to go to heavyweight, but DC says he has no problem going back down to 205. But Jones is 2-0 over DC. Do we really need a third at 205 or at all? We don't need a third at 205. I would like to see them fight at heavyweight, and I think everybody does. I want to see that fight at heavyweight because at least the variables change, that Cormier has that earth-shattering power, and he's stronger at 205. I do want to see that. I think the closest we got, at least to Jones, seeing him in heavyweight, which of course he made 205, but when he fought OSP and he was much bigger, he was definitely bigger, more muscular, but he didn't really look the same in a sense. It looked like he was a step slower, like he wasn't used to the body. Maybe it was a late opponent change. Maybe it was the layoff, but he didn't look quite like himself. Although as the fight progressed, he started sharpening up more. And not to say that he looked bad at any point. He looked fantastic, but just in comparison to what he looked before. So I think at heavyweight, he's going to be a little bit slower. At heavyweight, he's not going to those skinny legs they always talk about. It's going to be even more of a problem. I think the fight changes a bit. That's not saying that Jones can't win. You'd be a fool to pick against John Jones at this point, especially with him having defeated Daniel Cormier twice, even if one of them got overturned. But yeah, the variables do change. I don't need to see it at 205. We've seen that twice already. Rob saying, I hope they can fill some of the 205 holes through the Contender Series. They might be able to, but the problem is the Contender Series, at least the way Dana White has been framing it, is just a horrible, horrible way to scout for like long-lasting talent. When you don't sign a guy like Brendan Loughnane because he showed the ability to mix his martial arts, I think there's a problem. There's a big problem with that. So you saw in this last Contender Series, these guys just go out there and just trying to throw bombs, and they all, not all, but it was a lot of bad stuff going on. There's a lot of guys didn't look very good because of it, because they were trying to fight outside of what smart people fight. They're trying to just impress the guy sitting there who's judging them. To say, oh, this was exciting enough for me to sign you. Like, that's it's crazy. It creates an artificial environment. This is something that I've disliked about The Ultimate Fighter, is that it creates an artificial environment when you take guys out of their homes and out of their normal training camps and all their normal coaching situations, and you put them in a house with all their potential opponents, and you strip away magazines and TV and their families and everything else, and you isolate them, you create this artificial environment that doesn't reflect how someone would actually be performing as a UFC fighter. The Contender Series at least solves the reality TV aspect of it. But if Dana White is going to be judging the fighters in the sense of, oh, this is fun to watch, on you look like you tried to kill the guy the whole time, therefore you deserve to be signed. If that's the basis, you're not going to find the best fighters. At least not all the time. At least not most of the time. The best fighters don't go in there and try to take your head off all the time, unless that's just the best way they do things. If you have the power of a, of a Mark Hunt or Francis Ngannou, or John Lineker or something like that, yeah, you go in and try to knock their head clean off their shoulders because you're so good at it. But if that's not your style, but you have to put on this front to get in the UFC, I mean, you're just not going to find the best talent that way. So they can find some knuckleheads for sure, or some guys that can pretend to be knuckleheads, but are those guys going to develop into actual talent for the light heavyweight division? I don't know. I really don't know. We should be asking some very serious questions about what the Contender Series is going to offer the UFC roster. Outside of it just being a fun, bit of fast paced, entertaining fights to watch in the middle of the week. All right. Let's see what I got. Oh God, y'all got the questions coming. That's what's up. Let me see. Why has Ponzinibbio not been booked? He barely fights. Maybe Ponzinibbio versus Vicente Luque. I think Ponzinibbio needs to be fighting higher than that. Ponzinibbio needs to be fighting a guy who's higher ranked. Let me look at these right here. Vicente Luque is ranked at number 15. Ponzinibbio at 9. Ponzinibbio should be fighting someone much higher ranked than Vicente Luque at this point. Like that would be really insulting for Ponzinibbio to get placed like that, considering what he's done. I think honestly, I thought Ponzinibbio was going to be the guy that could possibly dethrone Tyron Woodley. Like I got high hopes for him, and I think the UFC is just trying to use him to build up the Latin American audience, but they got to throw him out there some more, man. Rob saying Ponzinibbio should be fighting Woodley. Yeah, I think that's a good fight. I really like that fight. That's a tough test for Woodley. Like if you're trying to build him back up, which I seriously doubt the UFC is too interested in, hence the Robbie Lawler booking. That's a good one. If Woodley were to survive that one, he gets out of that one, he puts Ponzinibbio out of there, right back in the title contention. Ponzinibbio beats Woodley, clear cut guy who should be in line for that title shot. Like, of course, we've got Askren and Masvidal coming up next. That's next week. That should be determining of a number one contender. If Colby Covington beats Robbie Lawler, even if Robbie Lawler wins, I'm sure they love Lawler. They'll try to find a way to sneak him in there. But Ponzinibbio is definitely deserves it more than Lawler if he were to beat Covington, for sure. Like that's easy. But I like Ponzinibbio versus Woodley as a next fight. Of course, Woodley's got to heal up. He broke his thumb, which is why this was the main event. Ngannou and Dos Santos, when they moved that from 239. So yeah. All right. Let's see what else we got. Wonder Boy wants to return at MSG. Who should he fight? Who should Wonder Boy fight? I mean, Wonder Boy and Ponzinibbio makes sense. That makes a lot of sense, actually. That might make more sense than the Woodley fight. Come think of it. Or Leon Edwards. Wonder Boy and Leon Edwards. I like that. Yeah, I can get behind that one. The same for Garbrandt. Who should Garbrandt fight? I have not thought about this in quite some time. Cody Garbrandt. Man, maybe a Sun Sao. I kind of like that, a Sun Sao, because I think you should throw Garbrandt right back right back in the lines. And give him time for his brain to heal and everything. And it was smart on him not to take the main event spot in Sacramento. But yeah, I like Garbrandt and a Sun Sal, man. I like to keep him closer to the top of the division. And just as an acknowledgement of the asterisks that we're going to put beside the TJ Dillashaw losses at this point. Oh yeah, Sun Sal is fighting Sandhagen. Yeah, Sun Sal fighting Sandhagen. Maybe the loser of that. You should fight the loser of that. Yeah, that should do it. Yeah, maybe Jimmy Rivera. All right. What else we got? See, Jay is suggesting Wonder Boy versus Easy Dos Santos or Vicente Luque. Those aren't bad options. Saying still surprised that Ponzinibbio isn't on the Uruguay card in August. That is really nuts. Like, he should be there for sure. If they're trying to build him into a Latin American star, or they're trying to hold him back for that reason, he should be there. Like, anytime the UFC is in a fight night or something there, and he's not booked for something in Vegas or in a big market city, put him there instantly. All right, so I'm gonna scan this chat for see if I'm missing any nuggets, and I appreciate you guys chiming in with a lot of good questions to keep the conversation flowing. But I do have a lot of writing to get to tonight, so I want to get a head start on it, so my Sunday is not spent banging my head against the keyboard. And I'm gonna get some Jack Daniels as soon as this is over with. Let's see. Do you think Corey Sandhagen has filled Sean O'Malley's spot? Has a panoramic prospect to break into the top 10? It's possible, but Sean O'Malley has a particular star factor. I mean, for right now, yes, O'Malley is, for all intents and purposes, doesn't exist. Considering that we haven't seen him for so long. It's been like over a year or something since we've seen him. But at the same time, he is Sean O'Malley is a star in the making. Like, he's a guy that once he steps back in front of a camera, we will forget about anyone else. That's just the level of star that guy is, and his fight style is so electric. I think Sandhagen can hold that spot for a little bit until O'Malley wants it back. And of course, let winners and losers dictate the rankings. But as far as the attention of everyone's attention spans, O'Malley is the guy to keep your attention. Just on a pure entertainment factor. Let's see what else we got. All right, Rob saying he's going to have his pairings on Tapology tomorrow morning. I will be checking that out, Rob. Looking forward to it. Okay, so I think we'll wrap this up for the evening. I definitely want to thank everyone who jumped on the chat and asked some good questions, kept the conversation flowing, and forced me to think on my feet. I definitely appreciate that. Got to sharpen up my game. So anyway, I'll tell you guys what I got coming up. The Good, Bad, and the Ugly, the usual post-fight column, will be on SureDog.com tomorrow. I'm going to start getting on writing that as soon as this broadcast ends. Also, I've got a video in the queue for MMA on Point. Which one is it? I think it's a video essay. Yeah, it's a video essay about longevity. So check that out when that goes live. The other one, which was performing so well, but had to get taken down due to some copyright issues. I guess someone opposed a video clip of theirs being used, but it was a good one about the top 5 frauds in MMA. So that was a fun one to write, and I probably pissed some people off. It's all good though. And what else we got coming up? So yeah, actually, next week there will be the Off the Chain episode 3. The panel discussion for SureDog.com. It'll be myself, Ben Duffy, and the homie who has been supplying me with some statistics and whatnot on the Slack chat, Jay Petrie. And there will be a 4th person on the chair as well. We haven't decided who the 4th one is, but if you are part of the SureDog.com staff, I'm sure I'll be reaching out to you for that. We'll be taping it Monday, and it will go live on Tuesday afternoon. Yeah, and I will be on the ground for UFC 239. So watch SureDog.com. Watch that website. There will be plenty of updates. I'll be on the media day. I'll be there trying to provide some content. I'll do my reporter thing, try to get some breaking news, some scoops for y'all. But yeah, check my Twitter feed at Ant Walker MMA, and you'll be able to find links to a lot of the things that's going on, any little things I'm hearing about fight. Also, Thursday, I will be joined by Jason Burgos as always, unless of course something going crazy going on and I can't do it. And in that case, Ben will probably step in for me. But either way, the trenches will be live on Thursday, 8 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. So definitely check all of those things out. So once again, I'm going to thank you guys for keeping me on my feet here and making this a fun thing to do for the Walk of Shame. I apologize, I haven't been putting more on this channel. I will as soon as I get some really. I got a pregnant wife, so I've been stressed and tired in addition to my multiple jobs. So definitely anything you guys want more of, please let me know. My DMs are open on Twitter and Instagram, Ant Walker MMA, both platforms. So just go ahead, hit me up, man, and we'll figure out something. What sort of content you guys want, and yeah, we'll make it happen. But anyway, that'll do it. I'm Ant Walker. This is the Walkout Network, and you have participated in the Walk of Shame for UFC Minneapolis. So you know what you got to do. You must stay beautiful. You must stay positive. You must not lose your mind as you lose your sleep. And through it all, you got to stay sexy. I will see you when I see you. Peace and